All right, hello everyone, and welcome back. This is going to be the second part of our blockout. We're going to continue along with this main um, metal part, and then we're going to continue to fill it up, add the more intricate parts later on. But for now, we still need to complete this guy, and you might be thinking this looks a little bit different from where we ended off last time. I decided just to cut this part in half because I was doing a little bit of work. What happened was, as I started this recording, I only got about 5 or 10 minutes in, but what happened was my computer actually ended up crashing. So I did lose a bit of the recording, but I'm just going to show you right now exactly what I ended up doing. It was really simple. So the only thing that I actually ended up changing was right here. I was looking a little bit more into the reference with how a lot of this is built, and it seems like it goes flat and then smooth transition through this rounded leg and then goes flat again. Because of so, I kind of needed to set this up so it goes flat, smooth, and then flat again. So I have this cut off here, and it's flush with this part. I also ended up thinning this out, I believe, a little bit and just sort of scooching it over so it's directly lined up with this part here. I also did a little bit more looking into the back, and this is how we already had it set up, which is good because it seems like this bottom part is kind of rounded and then cuts off at an angle, which is exactly how we have it set up here, which is really nice. I thought I was going to have to do something similar for the back, but it seems like we already have that covered. But with that out of the way, I'm just going to mirror this over and then we can continue about our ways. So just vertex snapping the pivot, freezing transformations, deleting history, and mirroring on X. We can then merge these verts, delete the edge loop, and yeah, we can mirror this guy over as well. It seems that he's a little off center, so let's undo that. Our pivot isn't exactly in the middle here, and boom. So now it's all level, everything's working pretty good. Except we just seem to be a little bit off with our scale on this guy. So let's just go ahead and select all of this and this. Going to move our pivot to the side here. Snap along the side. Select these guys and move our pivot to the side, and then we can just snap it where it's supposed to be. Cool. Okay, so we're back to where we should be. I'm just going to quickly save. Okay, so now one of the things that I want to do is show you some other ways of finding reference for this kind of stuff. So I've already gone over this document here, this PureF, where I've found a bunch of images. I've showed you that, hey, eBay is a good spot to find stuff. It's a good way to break things down based on their parts. But another really good thing is if this is a real object, like something that's already existing in a game maybe, or a physical object you can interact with in real life, it's really a good idea to see how other people have gone about doing this kind of stuff. I like to find, if I can, other people's models. So this is a different typewriter that was made on Sketchfab, and this is also a scan of a typewriter. Now we're going to be trying to go for something that's a bit higher quality than this, but this is really, really useful for just sort of having a camera and being able to put it exactly where you want to. Like I can stick the camera in here and just kind of get a better idea as to how this person put it together, because it seems like they've definitely been following a lot of reference, and we can make a bit more sense of some of these pieces. Now, they might not be 100% accurate, but they give us a decent representation as to how everything interacts with each other. Same with this here, like just being able to stick the camera in here and say like, oh, this is about how far back this actually is, and it's really easy to tell because I can manipulate the camera around it. So I'd highly recommend going on ArtStation or Sketchfab or anywhere you can find art. TurboSquid usually has a bunch of good models. But what I like about this one in the other 3D model is like certain parts like this where I couldn't really tell how they look, I start to get a bit more idea of the details. So I see this and I'm like, oh, it's kind of tapered off as we go up. Is that how it is in the reference? And surely enough, like it's hard to tell from this image, but since I'm looking out for it now, I can sort of move this around and be like, oh, maybe it is. Like, that kind of looks like it is tapered off. And I would never normally be looking for that kind of stuff, but now that the idea is in my head, we can start to sort of find images, and it really does look like that, but I would have never like thought that to begin with. So I knew there was one really good image that showed it off nicely. I think this one does a pretty good job. You can see how thin this is here, and it kind of widens out at the bottom. So let's go ahead and set that up for ourselves. Another thing to keep in mind actually is this looks pretty thick here. I think we could definitely thicken ours up quite a bit. But the thing is, like, this looks pretty thin here. This looks pretty thin. It's these walls and this bottom part that look pretty thick. So what I'm going to end up doing actually is grabbing this whole thing. And in fact, we can delete this part again, just because we know we're going to have to mirror everything over anyways. And I have my reference on my other screen just to give myself a bit more room to work. I'm just going to select all this stuff. And I'm going to scale it to how thin it looks. Just pressing D and clicking off of the object to reset my gizmo. I'm going to scale it to what kind of looks like the thinnest size, which is about this. Which is based on this ring up here. And from here, what we can do is kind of take these side pieces and this bottom piece and extrude it out. So that way this just stays thin, but everything else is thick. In order to do that, though, we are going to have to set up some extra edges. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm actually going to go ahead and isolate this. So how's the best way to set up these edges? I think it would probably be to cut across horizontally. So I'm gonna select here and click across, and then vertex snap this up here. We just want to have one seamless line, and this is kind of getting in the way. So I'm going to shift right click merge vertices to center, and just have that so it's a horizontal cut across. Do the same thing over here. Control Shift X once again to get to our cut tool. We can then snap that there. Combine these to center. Like so. And then we're going to have to do... actually, we won't have to do it for the bottom, because the only part that's going to be thin is the top part here. So let's go ahead and grab all these guys. Just want to make sure this isn't going to mess with anything. It seems like it should be fine. This is definitely a very irregular edge though, so I'm going to delete that. And we'll have to revisit that later. I'm just going to bridge it for now. Shift right click bridge, and then shift right click fill hole for up here. Which means this will be open, but we'll clean that up later once we get to the model that we're going to bring to ZBrush. That should be fine for placeholder. So let's just select all this stuff. We're going to dehide everything, and then shift click and drag to extrude, and just snap it to where it was before. So this way we have this thin part and this thick part. And if we're looking at it from here, it looks a lot more like the reference where this is thick, and for some reason up here it gets a lot thinner. And I imagine it would have to look like this on the inside. This is a good time where I can be like, hey, how did this person do it? This person opted to sort of make this whole thing the same thickness, so this is where you have to be a bit more careful with a lot of this stuff. Just because another model of this exists out there doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. Like, this is a very good model. Like, it's executed pretty well, but we're trying to go for like a cinematic level prop, so we have to make ours as realistic as possible. So we're going to be adding in those kind of extra details. I'm going to go ahead and delete these edges with the control backspace, or maybe not. It might just be easier to leave that in for now. So that's that there. This is now covering this part. Like I said, we're going to have to go in later and like cut this out and manually sew it in. And since we're going to have to mirror it over, we might as well just do it right now. It seems like we got a lot of weird overlapping geometry here. I'm trying to figure out what this face is specifically. I'm going to select this guy and just merge them. Just going to be a lot easier to work with. And then we can start doing our cutting. I'm going to save once again. I kind of feel like I need to save a lot more now that my computer crashed, and I'm very like kind of on edge that it's going to happen. So be sure to save every now and again. And now we can start to cut out our shape. So going to our cut tool, let's just trace around. And that's pretty much it. Delete these guys. The only reason we're doing this is so that it's one continuous mesh, not just overlapping faces. Just vertex snapping all these guys. Merge them. And then we can even close off some of this geometry just so it's a bit better. Obviously, this here could be connected, but for now I'm just going to leave it be. It should be fine the way it is. Okay, what we can actually do now as well is sort of work on this bell connection piece, and then actually get the bell in there as well. And that's where we're going to start to find some of our asymmetry, so this side will actually start to become a bit different than the other side. And because of so, I don't think there's anything else that makes these two sides different. So it might be a good idea to mirror this over now. Just double checking. I guess we do have these big metal connection pieces. And if we look at the one we're going to be following a bit more, it might be wise to actually tackle that first. Yeah, so I think we should do that part first. We can work on the bell after, because like I said, like that's not something we're going to mirror over. So there's no point in working on that now. And then work on this top piece, mirror it over, and then have to undo some work on the other side. Like that's just kind of counterproductive. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just trying to find a good reference for it. It seems like this one's pretty spot on. It sort of sticks out a little bit, goes straight up. But I'm trying to find a better side shot. Let's see. It's hard to tell. This one, it doesn't seem like it's on an angle, but it must be because it's the same as this guy here. So I'm just going to set up my own little reference board down here just for this specific part. So I'm just copying, right click, copy, and then Control V to get into place. We also have some cool tools like Control and Alt together will scale. So I'm going to scale these so that they are the same. Just going to bring it closer because I'm just focusing on these parts here. I'm going to put it on the other screen and we can go ahead and start to work on that. So let's see, what's the best way to go about this? I'm trying to judge the thickness on this as well, because now we made a situation where this part is thin, but we also have access to this these faces here, which we could instantly use to make that whole section thicker. To me at least, it kind of looks like this is a little bit thinner. Looks like this is the same width as this guy here. And actually looking at this now, this seems to be one continuous thickness. I guess it is different from version to version. For the sake of this though, I do kind of like this look, so I want to keep it this way. And we're going to go with having a thinner piece here that goes up. So let's see. I want to do a little bit more cross-reference because I do believe these are actually two different typewriters, because this one does seem to be going straight up and this one seems to be going out a little bit. So I'm actually going to delete that because that's not the one we're going to be going for. Let's see. Yeah, see, this guy's going straight up. This is the one that we're going for. Scale that up with a nice Control-Alt. And this picture actually has some good angles of what's going on inside of here. So I should probably be looking through my reference board a little bit more. And same with this guy. Yeah, this is another really good angle of it. Okay. So now that I got that set up, let's go ahead and actually make that. So first I'm just trying to get an idea of how much space this actually takes up. I'm looking at this side portrait and it seems to go a little bit past where the opening begins. So we can use that as a bit of a ruler. I'd say about here. So I'm going to put a cut through here. Scale this so it's nice and flat. We're just going to want to grab these faces here. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this edge, Control Backspace, just so it's easier to work with in general. And scale this up. Let's just get rid of these for now. Just keep this as simple as possible. So I just want to get the height of it, which seems about yay high. And then we sort of have this like concave curve. It seems like on this side it's totally even, this side it's skewed, but nevertheless, we definitely have sort of like this slanted look to it. So let's just try and get an accurate angle. And from here we can add in a cut. I want to scale this in based on the level of the edge loop that we have in here. So I can double click our scale tool, change this from object to component. Interesting. Change it to a long rotation axis, interesting. So sometimes what happens is it would just sort of be flush with this line, so this green line would be level with that. I guess for now we're just going to go back to world and scale it this way. It should be fine. We'll just have to adjust the angle a little bit later. So I want to get rid of that. And we can scale this in. We're already getting at shape pretty well. From here, actually, if I select this face and I go to component, that's what I'm talking about there. I think it's a bit different with edges. See, if I select the single edge, it does that. So let's just select those two edges, scale it in. I can now select that whole edge loop and hit Control B to bevel it. And before I do so, I kind of want to actually lower this a bit more. I'm just trying to mimic this as good as I can, like the general silhouette, before I add in any more geometry and complicate things. Seems like that's got the general shape to it. I might actually just take these and move them a bit over. It might have been a little bit too big. All right, so let's try and bevel that there. Round out these top pieces with a bevel as well. It seems like we should probably give it a bit more breathing room. So I just made sure I didn't extend that other bevel as much. So now when we get these corners, we get a nice rounder transition. Which is good right now for our block out. I'm going to go ahead and just sort of play with these edges a little bit more to get that shape. Just glancing down at the reference, trying to keep it as accurate as possible. Seems like when I beveled that, the edges got a line, so I'm just going to merge them. It's not close enough, so I'm just going to merge to center, merge to center. So now they should be just one set of verts. And this is definitely looking a decent amount thicker. So I'm going to want to, let's see with this reference. I can't quite tell from this angle how thick this specific piece is, if this is really thin or if this is a part of it. Because this seems to be a lot thicker than, maybe not. Maybe, maybe thinning this out wasn't the best idea. So what I'm actually going to do, and this is a really easy fix, is select all these pieces. And I'm still going to make it thinner, but just drag it over a little bit. So it's like so. So it's thinner, but not completely. If you want to avoid this part and just keep it the same thickness all the way around, I would totally understand that. Adding that small amount of detail for that much geometry probably is something that in most cases isn't really worth it. It's such a minor detail, but for me personally, I think you can slightly tell, and because of so, I think I'm gonna go ahead and keep that. And I think having these little ledges here are gonna come into play later on when we're adding more pieces. So for now, I'm gonna keep that the way it is. That thickness seems to work as well. So a little bit thinner, but for the sake of this, and I might just be totally off, it might just be better to do that. Let's just double check everything. Yeah, that might just be one continuous thickness all the way around. So where did we find the outlier? Interesting. Okay, well, let's scratch that. Let's go ahead and delete these guys. We're just going to go back and make it all the same thickness, because it appears to be much more common in the reference that way. Okay. Put that back on top. Merge the verts. Okay. Okay, so now we're back on track. Let's continue along. The next part is we're going to want to punch out that hole there. That should be relatively simple considering the techniques that we now know. I'm just going to massage this shape a little bit more. Let's try and extend this guy out a little bit. Round this guy out. Because this is more of a subtle one, and this definitely seems to be a lot more sharp. Okay, so yeah, punching a hole in it is going to be, well, pretty easy. We're just going to be using a Boolean for that. So you guys should know by now the drill with that. I'm just trying to get the angle on this correct. I think something like that. Something like that's working a lot better. Yep. Okay. So punching a hole into it, then softening it. Before doing any Boolean operation, I always recommend saving, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so grabbing a cube that we can cut this hole out with. Of course, we could just use a cut tool, cut it, bridge everything over, and just sort of close the hole that way. But this way, I find is way easier. It's going to give us sort of like a real-time perspective on it all anyways. So we might as well use the tools that we installed and get a good result in doing so. When doing this, we kind of want to obviously accurately recreate that, but also keep in mind we're going to be beveling a lot of this stuff and softening it. So the size of the hole is actually going to grow relative to the space when we do start softening and beveling things. So give it a little bit of breathing room. It's always easier to sort of grow the size of the hole after. So there's no need to try and overcompensate with any of that stuff. So let's just center this guy out. In fact, we can use our technique where we poke face. It's going to go into wireframe. Snap that so it's dead in the middle. And then now delete these faces. And now it's just a matter of our y-axis where we're placing this. Let's go ahead and place it. Roughly there's fine. I might even shrink it a little bit more. And then, yep, let's go and save really quickly again and do our Boolean. So getting our Boolean DC Bool Manager, selecting our primary, our secondary with a shift click and just new Boolean operation. Quick and easy. We can still, of course, go in here and just subtly adjust how this is placed. Cleanup, delete history and base objects. Pretty easy. We should all be getting pretty comfortable with that. We can then quickly go ahead and clean this up. Just vertex snapping these, of course. Selecting everything, merging the verts. And then by selecting these faces and hitting Control B, we can get that bevel. We might not want to bevel it that way yet. Let's just actually select the inner edges. To get that kind of edge loop, I'm just selecting one, shift, and double clicking the one beside it. It gets the whole ring. And Control B, and we can sort of go for this for now, which is what I'm more concerned with, getting the silhouette more than anything. Nice, okay. Cool. Another thing is these bolts here. The bolts, we're just going to quickly add in some cylinders. There's a couple ways we can obviously do that. Just go to create polygon primitives cylinder and plop that in. I did show you guys though in the very beginning that I use this plugin over here a lot. Model it or mold it or however you want to pronounce it. It's really quick because if I say select a face, I can then say, oh, here's cylinder, right click it, cylinder with 12 sides, boom. It puts it in and it's already level with the face. So I can do that. This was one of the paid ones though, so obviously you guys don't have to use this, but I'm assuming you don't want to see me just sort of fumble around trying to level a cylinder. You guys should all know how to do that, I'd say. So yeah, just for these specific parts, it might just be quicker for me to do that and save you guys some time so that you don't have to watch. Obviously, in order to put a cylinder into your scene, you don't have to pay. So, like, I don't necessarily mind showing that off. So, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do that for this part. And I'm just trying to match this reference here, the size. These are pretty generously sized. Maybe not quite that big. More like so. And we can scale it up maybe another 10-20%. Give it some breathing room. This is also really good because it shows us that we kind of have to round it around this a little bit better. Select these two guys, scale them. We're starting to get that position a little bit more. And yeah, like I said, I kind of want to use it as more of a guide to round this out. This, of course, is all going to be completely overhauled once we do the version that we're going to be bringing into ZBrush. We're going to try and add in way better edge loops and support everything a little bit better. But it's just going to bother me way too much if we leave it the way that it is, knowing that we're going to have to go back and fix it regardless. Okay, so that's starting to look quite a bit better and starting to match our reference quite a bit. One of the things that you will notice in this reference, though, is that this kind of rounded leg part domes off as it connects up here. Ours is just sort of like a harsh cutoff, so we're going to have to do something about that. What we can do is select these faces here. And this is something that I haven't been doing until recently that I'm kind of happy that I decided to experiment with and figure out, is if we select these faces and we just sort of move the pivot to the axis that we want to rotate off of, we can then Control E, go to our rotation tool, and from here we can just rotate that extrusion. And then, of course, holding J, we can snap. And we can just sort of rotate that perfectly 90 degrees. Obviously, we have a little bit of overlap. So I'm going to just sort of fudge this in place a little bit. Get it to be something like that. We can then maybe add an extra edge in here. And reset that pivot and just sort of massage it a little bit better into place. I'm actually gonna, let's see, yeah, we're gonna have to delete these faces here, so I'm gonna select one of these, shift period to grow selection, and then deselect anything extra. We can delete those faces, and now there's nothing in there. Gross selection is really useful. Say I want to get like just this ring part, I can select these faces and then shift period multiple times, and it just sort of grows a selection by whatever is touching the currently selected face, or whatever you have selected at the time. So that's super useful. Let's actually round this guy out a little bit better. So I'm just in the cut tool, holding Control and Shift, getting that about halfway, selecting this edge. We can then move the pivot to the corner here, and our scale tool seems to still be on component, which is really good, so we can just scale this out like so, getting it to be just a little bit rounder, matching our reference a bit more. And that's going to be really nice once we start to smooth things down a lot. It's going to essentially sort of melt into it. It's going to look pretty nice. So I'm really looking forward to that. This whole shape is just like one hunk of soft, smooth metal, even though we have all these complex shapes set up. So neat. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be saving a lot more from now on. So let's go ahead and save again. And looking back at this reference that I found on Sketchfab, I see that this part here is actually hollow. So that's interesting. I'm going to see how it's interpreted in the scan, and obviously it's very muddied up. This is kind of a hard to reach area, but it kind of seems, based on the coloring, that that might be the case, so it should be worth investigating. Surely enough, we do have it hollow in here. Yeah, we can clearly see that it's hollow, so let's go ahead and get that shape. I'm just going to keep that in the corner. So to do that, we can go ahead and just delete all these faces on the back. Simple enough. Same with these guys, we're not going to be needing them. And let's just add a, how far does that go? Okay. Let's add a edge loop from here where we can sort of extrude in. I just don't want this edge loop to go all the way around. So just to keep it simple, I'm going to take these faces, shift right click, extract them so they're a different mesh. This way, when I go back to the cut tool, it's going to be easier to work with. Let's roughly guess how thick we want this to be. Or maybe this is, let's see. Okay, I'm definitely just overcomplicating it. Let's not do that. Let's keep it one mesh. And yeah, let's just select all these faces here. Control E to extrude them. For thickness, we're going to go into the negatives. Actually, first we need to give this some actual depth to it. So no, I was onto something there. Let's let's extract these faces. Sometimes I think like 10 steps ahead and then I have to figure out what exactly my brain was trying to process. Okay, so let's select these faces, and this will make a lot more sense in a second. We can then extrude this back a little bit. We're trying to get the actual thickness of this. It seems like this is pretty thin, but we don't want it to be too thin, because then you'll never actually notice it. Sometimes you want to exaggerate these features. So let's go ahead, and it seems like the easiest way to do this is actually to delete these faces. Yeah, it seems like this is an awkward ordeal. So for this, what I'm going to do is we can open up our Smart Mesh tools. This is a good time to use it. We can smart duplicate the face. So we selected that. Now it's a separate model, which is really convenient. Our normals are inverted though, which is not really good news. So all we have to do is I have this added to my shelf, which once again is Control-Shift-Click, but we can go to Mesh Display, Reverse to get our normal setup that way. From here, I can just snap this guy on, which is pretty nice. We can make this one mesh. Make sure we merge those vertices. Cool. We do need to get the actual thickness of everything though. So how are we going to go about doing that? There's a million ways to do things. First, let's bridge this, selecting the inner edges and the inner edges of here. Shift right click bridge. So we're essentially trying to get a outline of this inset into our faces. And one way to do that is just by selecting all of these faces here. And hitting Control E to extrude and using the offset tools. So we can offset it, I want to say about 0.35. Maybe 0.3 was fine, which is great. These inner ones we're not going to need. Same with down here. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup where I'm just going to move all these down because we don't necessarily need them. These we definitely don't need any of. Just getting a little messy just because we extruded past what we should have for this area. That's okay though, because we're not actually using any of this geometry. Cool. Okay, let's just merge everything. Is there any geo down here we should be concerned about? No, but we have some mystery vertices. Let's just make sure that's all taken care of, merge them. Oh, same with this edge. Let's just get this to some kind of corner. Merge that, cool. And then this doesn't seem to be following the same thickness just because we dragged it down. So let's just level that out a little bit. We can select here, shift drag, and now we have the same shape. Size might be, I mean, it seems pretty accurate, but we can of course play with it a little bit. Just might want to make it a little thicker for when we bevel it, so it has a bit more room to play. I'm going to delete these bottom faces while we're at it. Select these edges. Let's change our scale tool back to world so it's relative to what we're doing. Bring those down and bridge this across so it's all sealed up. Now once again we're having one of those cases where here's an edge that's attached to this face right here, but this edge is just resting on top of it. That obviously can't happen, so put a vert on this here. Put a vert on this here using the cut tool. We can snap those on top, and since they're directly on top of each other, if we merge them, they'll become continuous geometry. Cool. So that's a pretty good representation of this shape here. We're going to have to round it out a little bit later on, but for the most part, I think that's probably it. We have this extra set of edges here that we really don't need, so Control Backspace to get rid of those. Cool. The good thing about this is once our blockout is primarily done, getting from the blockout stage to our mid poly that we're going to send over to ZBrush is really, really quick. Once this is set up, I can just say like, hey, let's make sure this and this are attached. Boom, 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 set up a couple things, bring it into ZBrush, and it's done. Seems like at some point it connected these guys, so we might as well connect to this piece as well. Shift right click, combine. And with that piece done, we should probably hit save once again. Cool, so we got that done. We can move on to the back piece, which seems to be a little bit easier to work with. It's always hard to say until you actually start making it, but it kind of seems like a part that just juts out a little bit, has a smooth transition, and spikes up. It is kind of like a hard surfaced soft shape, which is obviously a bit difficult to work with, but I think that this should be fine. Let's go ahead and work with that. The fact that it's coming out of a cylinder, though, does make it a bit more tricky to work with. And because of so, it's always nice to kind of have a 3D reference to look at. So we've already discovered that these might not be totally accurate. One thing I'm starting to notice as well is that their rounded leg doesn't jut out nearly as much as ours does. But it seems like in the reference, like especially here, like it's poking out a decent amount. We might have it over exaggerated a little bit, but I think once we smooth it down, that's going to be dramatically reduced inside of ZBrush. So I'm really not too worried about that. So let's go ahead and start working on this back piece. And just by looking at how this guy has it set up, seems like he probably just has an extraction. We can even, this is one of the great things about this, we can even just sort of go into the wireframe and see how they did it, where it literally looks like they just cut it, extracted, or extruded rather, and then extruded up once again. So that's always cool. Just looking at the real life model, seems to sort of go in, but I don't think I see that in our reference. Or maybe it does. Huh. Okay. Well, let's just sort of go for it and see exactly more or less what comes out of this shape here. Just trying to understand this pocket a little bit better. So it goes up, curves around. Let's get some other angles of it. Yeah, it seems like all these do them slightly differently, like how this one sort of has this larger piece chunked out. And this is what I'm talking about here. Like this has a harsh cutoff, similar to ours. So maybe this is a good one to see. Yeah, this one seems to be harsh, sticks out. So we should be good. We should definitely be good with the way that it's set up right now. Let's go back to our main reference. I'm just going to keep this off screen for now. We can go ahead and extrude this. This being flat seems to be working with our current setup, which is really nice. So let's go ahead and seems like this is giving us some issues. Let's merge that. Just trying to get a nice clean edge loop here. Make that level. Okay, that's all good. We can go ahead and say bevel that just so we have two edges now. And with two edges, we can start to grab these guys and extrude them out. You'll see in a second why we might want to have two edges. I'm actually just going to directly pull this out. And with the second edge, we can do something like this where we get a bit of a smoother transition. Okay, so I'm going to want these guys to be flattened off. That is way more geometry than we need, obviously, so let's go ahead and clean that up. Maybe in a second, actually. What we can actually do is if we scale this, let's merge everything first. If we select this, scale it, yeah, that's going to give us some issues. Unless maybe we move our pivot over. No, that's still going to give us some issues. I think we should be fine with that thickness. So let's go ahead and I should probably keep the reference here just so you guys sort of have a better idea as to what I'm looking at. Pull this out a little bit, and in doing so we should probably pull this guy out a little bit. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to keep this guy back here. This one I can pull forward though, so that's good. I suppose I can... No, I'm going to keep that round. Seems a bit tall. Something definitely seemed off, and I think it's the height of everything. Yeah. Definitely want to narrow that out a little bit. For this, what I want to do is maybe not bevel it. Something is preventing good results. Kind of want to see how this turns out. Not the best. Okay. So yeah, getting this smooth transition might be a bit trickier than I first thought. Maybe what I should do is actually not be extruding from the whole part. I think I'm on the right track, but I think this is way too thick. So let's Control Z quite a bit. One thing I will also recommend is if we go into our settings here and you go to undo, having undo on infinite is probably a good idea. By default, it has a limit to how many of your past undos you can actually do. But if you check it to infinite, you can go back as far as you want. Very, very useful. Like if this was set to 50, I don't think I would have been able to go all the way back, which would have been quite an issue. So what I was trying to say before is maybe we should only get about half of this to extrude. And then that way, when we flatten it out, like this is more like what I was going for in general. It might be more tricky with this part. But yet again, that's already looking infinitely better. So I guess we're going to be going with that. Cool. Just going to straighten that out so it's easier to work with. Yeah, and this way we can get much smoother transitions. So it seems like this goes out a fair amount. Let's go ahead and clean this up just so it's easier to work with, and just vertex snapping everything. The bottom is going to have to stay as triangles. But that should be pretty fine for now. We can still work with that. Merge that up. Nope. I hit merge to center. Just want to merge vertices. Okay. So this transition distance is going to be this here. So let's try and get that accurate. This sticks out a decent amount, about that far. This follows it like so. And then we might want to just round this out a little bit. So let's add an extra edge loop in there. We're just going to want to select these guys in our weird edge loop situation. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely getting a much more accurate shape now. This does seem a little bit shorter though, so let's go ahead and raise all of this up. And I might even want to say that this is a bit skinnier. So we can try and taper it after the fact. What would happen if I did that? Yeah, that's terrible. I think this is fine. Pulling it off like that. And then the good thing about this setup is if we want it to be smoother, we can just bevel it now and sort of adjust it that way. I don't think I'm going to want to do that for now. For now, I think I do need to extend this length. And in doing so, extend this length. And then maybe raise this up so we have this sort of like long but gradual transition. My only concern is that this might be too sharp, but it doesn't seem that bad. This face is a little wonky, so if I connect this, that should solve our problems. It's always good to look at things with wireframe off. So we're definitely getting some pretty aggressive stretching based on this guy here. We might need to actually do something like this, where we just sort of scale it in. Yeah, and that's going to solve our problems just with a bit of a softer transition out. So now if we look at that, yeah, it's a bit easier. It isn't perfect, but it's fine for now. I'm also noticing this edge loop can totally get deleted. Like a lot of this is just smoothing. Like if I just went like boom, boom, like it's better. But that's stuff that we can take care of later. We don't need to necessarily worry about that at the moment. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. One thing I want to do just to make everything look a bit better is hit it with an auto smooth. Just going to take care of things so there's no like weird hard edges where there shouldn't be. I mean, this is kind of weird. I'm going to go ahead and just manually soften that. Okay. Cool. I think I messed some stuff up. Let's undo that. Let's just grab that there. Soften. Okay. There we go. We're in a good place. So, looking at this reference, it seems like this comes out. It actually seems like this is quite a lot shorter than I have it made out to be at the moment. So let's fix that. It's more like that, and then this part is extruded up at the end. This part also, according to the reference, I was hitting F to get that in center. Seems to still be rounded out. So we'll have to take care of that. Let's just add one in the middle to remind ourselves when we're doing it later on that, hey, this guy stays round. And then this is where we extrude up. So it seems like if we add an edge loop there, just flatten that out. We can then, extrude that guy up like so. And then we're gonna have to sort of mess with the scaling of everything just to sort of get it precise. This seems to be a bit long. Realistically, it's more like that. Did this mess with anything? Okay. Yeah, so this is definitely just a lot of back and forth, fixing the thickness. Even this guy can probably be pushed back a little bit. Cool. Just looking at it from far away and comparing it to the reference. Let's see what other ones are starting to look like. If we can get a good angle on any of these. So yeah, it does have that hollowed out sort of concave part that we can sort of tackle once we are doing the pre-ZBrush version. Might have to use a Boolean to get that one. Okay, so maybe we should just stick to this set of reference at the bottom. I think we're pretty much there in general. I just want to thicken this guy up a little bit. Okay, cool. I think this top piece just needs to be a bit bigger and then we can move on. I'm going to even just snap it to there. merge it. We can probably call it at that. The smoothing is really awkward though, so let's soften that edge. This should also be beveled, which of course is gonna not be the easiest setup, but we can then just take some verts, combine them where they need to go. There we go. So I'm happy with that for now. We'll have to come back to it obviously, but honestly, I think it's doing a pretty good job of representing the final shape. Just trying to get the smoothing on it to be good. And that should do for now. Okay, so let's mirror this guy over. We'll have to revisit that later on. Move our pivot to the center, freeze transformation, delete history, mirror over on X. Oh, that's right. So we don't have this actually centered. So let's get everything lined up. Center this guy. Center this guy. Gonna delete our duplicated piece. And we can snap this based on where this lines up. Cool. And there we go. Oh, right. Yeah, we didn't actually re-merge this, so let's undo that. Forgot about this guy. Let's just quickly add that back in. Mesh combine. Merge the vertices. Put our pivot back in the middle. And mirror over. Boom. Let's quickly save again. Sweet. And now we're actually really starting to see a decent amount of progress with this. I think this is starting to look pretty good. We're definitely getting there. The back piece connects. We're gonna have to move this guy over. And let's get some work done on this bell piece, and then that will probably do it for this specific chapter. So the bell piece should be pretty straightforward. We saw in the references, but also we can see in this 3D model where it curves up. So getting that shape shouldn't be too difficult. Let's just add in some edge loops that we've done many times. Just going to even this out. Control B to bevel it, so we have 2 lines instead of 1. I think 0.35, 0.4 should probably get this done pretty well. Let's line it up somewhere we think is pretty good. I might even give this a smidgen more room. So yeah, if we look at this, it seems that it goes about just under halfway up. So let's start by extruding this up. Using poke face to sort of get our middle point. Snapping this halfway and then saying, okay, let's lower it about yay high. So now we know confidently that it's below the halfway mark. This one's pretty straightforward. We're just going to be scaling this in. Of course, we still want it to have thickness, so we're not going to be merging anything. And then giving it one edge loop in the middle where we can skew this in like so. Get it to about the halfway point where we can then bevel it. For this, I'm going to give it 2 segments just so we have that middle point back again in case we want to delete these two edges. We still have a middle. I'm going to, actually before we do that, let's delete that. Let's taper off the top before we do anything else. Just make it easier to work with everything. It seems about yay wide. Maybe a little wider. The bottom appears to be wider than we currently have it set up. So it's more like this kind of shape. And add our edge loop back to the middle. Push that in. Bevel it this way. Our beveled lines are like following the taper, so we don't have to worry about anything like that. We're getting that clean transition. And then the last thing we have to really worry about is just rounding off the top. I'm going to merge that just because the top ones are touching. And then even down here, I'm kind of tempted, just because of how slick of a transition that is. I'm just setting that up right now, and then just doing some really quick cleanup. And then I also just want this to stay as a continuous edge. Cool. Let's auto smooth this part of our mesh so it's more visually accurate. Seems like this didn't quite make the cut up here, so we can just smooth that ourselves. And okay, the casing is starting to come together. All right, so if we look at our diagram, for the most part, I think that does it for the red part. So now that we have that kind of in place, it makes everything else a lot easier to deal with and a lot easier to start placing. We're going to do this green part next. Once that's in place, sort of work on some of the stuff up top. But now that we have a good foundation here, because this is kind of the component that houses everything in the actual asset, housing all of our sub-object pieces is going to become a lot easier. So this is definitely a good foundation. I'm going to go ahead and combine all of this. And yeah, we're in a pretty good position moving forward. So thanks for watching this part. I will see you guys in part 3 of this block out. We're going on pretty strong. So hopefully you guys are enjoying so far. See you in a bit.